Welcome to Module 3, Fact and Opinion. Facts and opinions are both valid sentences. However, in order to think critically, a reader needs to differentiate between the two types of statements. What is the difference between fact and opinion? It is best to start our discussion by defining the terms involved. A fact can be proven by objective evidence. When a statement is objective, it is not open to interpretation. It expresses no feelings or emotions, feelings or prejudices. In other words, a fact can be proven by physical proof or witness testimony. Let's take a look at some examples that are statements of fact. Long Island, which stretches 118 miles out into the Atlantic, is part of the state of New York and is actually bigger than the smallest state in the United States, Rhode Island. The subject of a sentence will never be found inside a prepositional phrase. Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are characters in the Star Wars movies. Now, some students have difficulty with deciding whether a statement is a fact because they don't know if the statement is true. It's not up to you to decide if the statement is true. It is only your job to determine if you can prove it. So let's take a look at those statements that we just viewed before, and let's discuss how we would be able to prove whether or not these are facts. Well, for this one here, the one about Long Island, we could look at a map of Long Island, visit a website about Long Island. For this one here, about where we find the subject of a sentence, we could ask an English teacher or maybe look inside a grammar textbook. And for this one down here with Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, we could watch the Star Wars movies, or we could ask a fan of the Star Wars movies. And for all three of these statements, we could just Google it. We can Google these things to find out whether or not they are statements of facts. Now, we don't really have to do those things, but the point is that if we wanted to, we could. And since there would be proof and there would be testimony, that means that these statements are all factual. Another thing to keep in mind is that even if something seems really weird or ridiculous and you find yourself thinking, there's no way that could be true, well, again, keep in mind, it's not up to you to decide if you could prove it, only that you could prove it. So let's take a look at one of those examples. On November 17, 1977, Abby Moore, weighing in at 87 pounds, ate her weight in cucumbers at the Westchester County Fair. Now, you might think that this would be impossible, but we could check the records for this event, and since it's something that we could look up, that means that it is a statement of fact. All right, now that we know what a fact is, we need to define an opinion. An opinion is a personal belief or judgment that is subjective. An opinion cannot be measured or quantified. When a statement is subjective, it is open to interpretation. There may be emotions involved, and that means that the statement is open to question and debate. Let's take a look at some examples of opinions. Long Island is a great place to raise a family. It is very important to identify the subject of a sentence. Han Solo is much cooler than Luke Skywalker. In those examples, the words great, very important, and much cooler are considered value words. Value words subjectively evaluate or interpret reality, and they can give or take value away from something. If I say Long Island is a great place to raise a family, I am placing value on Long Island. The opposite happens if I were to say that it is a terrible place to raise a family. Then I'm taking value away from it. That's why we call those words value words. Another thing to keep in mind is that some statements can actually be a mixture of both fact and opinion. So let's take a look at one of those examples. Long Island, which stretches 118 miles out into the Atlantic, is part of the state of New York and is a great place to raise a family. Now, we can prove that first part right here where we say that Long Island stretches 118 miles out into the Atlantic. So that part of the statement is actually a fact. But right here, the word great is one of those value words that I just told you about. So that makes that part of the statement opinion. So here you have a statement that is a mixture of both. Let's take a look at another one. Bradley Cooper, who is one of the finest actors today, stars in the award-winning movie Silver Linings Playbook. Do you see which part of the statement is fact and which part is an opinion? We can prove that Bradley Cooper starred in the movie Silver Linings Playbook. We can also prove that the movie won many awards. But right here, that's one of those value words, finest. My definition of a fine actor and your definition of a fine actor may be different. So we can't prove that Bradley Cooper is a fine actor because of that value word. So that statement is another example of a mixture of both. Something you need to be careful of when it comes to fact and opinion is to make sure you leave your opinions aside. For instance, you may agree that Bradley Cooper is a fine actor, but that does not make the statement a fact. Remember, finest is one of those value words, and my opinion of what makes an actor fine could be different from yours. So that means there's no way of proving whether or not this is true. Another thing that you need to watch out for is when authors tell you what you should, ought to, or must do. These words should, ought to, and must are persuasive language. When you see those words, that means that the author is trying to persuade you with his or her own opinions. Those types of words are subjective, and persuasive language means that you are being swayed with an opinion. So let's take a look at an example that includes some of that persuasive language. Every parent ought to give his child a pet since it teaches responsibility. Colleges should institute mandatory attendance policies to improve success in the classroom. This country must stop the petty arguments over politics and unite to make the U.S. a better place. Should, ought to, and must, remember, those are words that the authors use when they want to try to persuade you, and you need to remember that when you see that persuasive language, you are reading statements of opinion. Finally, you need to be aware of statements presented as facts that are really opinions. Let's take a look at some examples. Everybody knows New York has the best bagels and pizza. Well, first of all, you might notice this word right here. The word best is a value word. There's no way to determine what best is. My opinion of best could be very different from your opinion of best. But what you want to pay attention to here is this part of the statement, everybody knows. Just because I say everybody knows something doesn't mean that it's a fact. So that's a statement of opinion. And here's another one. The fact is that Florida has the most beautiful beaches. Again, we have some value words, most beautiful. There's no way to factually prove what is most beautiful. But just because I say that something is a fact doesn't mean that it is a fact. So just because I've worded a statement to make it look like a fact, that doesn't mean that it necessarily is. And keep in mind, there's no way that we can prove best or most beautiful. Those are value words, so those are two statements of opinion. Okay, let's practice a few more examples to see if you've mastered the difference between fact and opinion, and let's sharpen those critical thinking skills. We'll take a look at some statements. They could be just fact, they could be just opinion, or maybe they're both. Let's try this one. St. Petersburg College is located on Florida's Gulf Coast. That is a statement of fact. We could Google this information or visit the college's website. Fact, opinion, or both. The Clearwater Aquarium provides fun for the entire family. That is definitely an opinion. Did you spot the value word right here? The word fun is a value word. My opinion of fun and your opinion of fun could be very different. There's no way to prove what fun is, so that is definitely a statement of opinion. Here's another one. Winter, the famous dolphin who was the star of the movie Dolphin Tale, is the most playful animal I have ever seen. Fact, opinion, or both? This one is a mixture of both. The first part of the sentence is a fact. We can look at the aquarium's website to confirm that Winter the dolphin stars in the movie. But right here we have a value word, most playful. I might have a dog that I consider to be more playful than Winter. You can't really measure what playfulness actually is, so those are value words. So this statement is a mixture of both. How about this one? Students should read more books instead of wasting so much time on the internet with social media. This one is definitely an opinion. Did you see the persuasive language right here with the use of the word should? Now, even though most reading teachers, including myself, would agree, this is definitely an opinionated statement. So what have we learned about fact and opinion? We've learned that facts can be proved through witness testimony, physical proof, or the ability to research it. We've learned that opinions often use value words and are open to interpretation. And we've learned that some statements can be a mixture of both. We learned that you need to leave your opinions aside, because just because you agree with something doesn't mean that the statement is a fact. Also, we need to be aware of persuasive language like should, ought to, and must, and we need to remember to look out for statements of opinions presented as facts.